Independently of the script, the timing of how a character delivers a line or expresses a thought can be very unique and can really express what that character is all about. Now, with one same voice, just by varying the timing of it, you can really perform a stoner dude, you could perform, a hardball, business shark, or just a guy next door. Now, how exactly do you do that? Stick around and we'll talk all about the category of momentum. Hello! Welcome back to Character Voice Building with me, Fernando Macias. I am here to help you build and develop well-rounded character voices. Now, we are in the category of momentum. And in this video, I'm actually going to cover both of the elements in that category. So we're going to knock out this category with one video. Both of those elements in the category of momentum are speed and flow. I'm doing them together because they're very, very intertwined with each other and they're kind of dependent to each other, and you'll see why in a little bit. Now, what is momentum? In physics, it's the quality of motion of an object. So I really enjoyed that description. I applied it to voiceover, and I define it as the quality of motion in a voice. Basically, timing and how you say things as time goes by. As I mentioned, the category of momentum has two things: speed and flow. Speed is how fast a character says words. So it's not just in general like how fast that person is, just how fast the words are spoken. Flow is how interrupted a sentence or thought is. It can be thought of as distinct rhythmic patterns or distinct rhythmic chunks and elements, or even just general guidelines. Now, these two combined are a big part of what makes the element of musicality, and I think musicality is one of the most important things you can have in a voice to really have something that sticks in people's minds. Now, it's important to keep both speed and flow in mind when, talking about momentum. Fast speed doesn't necessarily mean streamlined. Doesn't even mean you can convey information faster. It just means that each of the words are spoken pretty quickly. You might think, okay, that doesn't make sense. If the words are spoken quicker, how is information not conveyed quicker? Well, that's when flow comes in. You can have somebody speak the individual words faster, but be very interrupted and sporadic in the flow. Whereas you can have somebody speak the words slower, but have a very steady, uninterrupted flow, and in the end, that person will convey an idea faster. So speed is pretty self-explanatory. We're all familiar with that. So I'm gonna do some thoughts on flow. Flow, think of it musically, rhythmically. Think of it, one way of thinking about it is tiny chunks, tiny rhythmic chunks. Dan, 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 dan. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I've never found a place where I couldn't stare directly into the sun. You could have very straight ahead on the grid, like 4-4. I've never found a place where I couldn't stare directly into the sun. You could have a rhythmic chunk of just, 1 to 3 words or syllables in each of those chunks. I've never found a place where I couldn't stare directly into the sun. So that's thinking about it in terms of rhythmic chunks. You can also think about it as loose guidelines. For example, you can have something like straight ahead at the beginning, but then just tapers off at the end. I've never found a place where I couldn't stare directly into the sun. You could have the opposite, very interrupted at first, but ends tight. I've never found a place where I couldn't just stare directly into the sun. Remember, these are just examples. There's many, many ways to do this. One last thing to consider here is consider how you trail or lead your rhythmic chunks. Is it hard, cut, and dry, or do you have long tails like reverb or bridges between the other glue between each of the sections? So this will be the same speed and flow for this example, but the actual trailing at the end will be different. I've never found a place. I've never found a place. So that's the general idea behind speed and flow. So let's get into Example 1. I remember when I was in Xanadu South Dakota, North France. I got bit by a tiny, terrible tortoise. It gave me the willies, but it was fantastic. 5 stars. Fast, but very interrupted flow. Rhythmic chunks are very on the grid. Trailing is very clear cut. It takes a long time to get that thought out, but it adds intrigue.
Exemple 2.
I remember when I was in Xanadu, South Dakota, north of France, I got bit by a tiny, terrible tortoise. Gave me the willies, but it was magnificent. 5 stars. It's very slow speed, but steady, uninterrupted flow, barely any punctuation, no real rhythmic chunks, just a big wave of sound, man. Hang loose, or tight, or hang 10, wherever you say.
Example 3.
So for industry examples, I have 3 from completely different applications. First, I have Rob Lowe as Chris Traeger from Parks and Recreation. I know I've done him before, but this is just a prime example of a combination of fast speed, but very interrupted, choppy flow. And the trailing is very hard cut. This helps mirror that relentless enthusiasm that he has, but it also reflects well on a man who has an extremely tight and scheduled regimen.
I take care of my body above all else. Diet, exercise, supplements, positive thinking. Scientists believe that the first human being who will live 150 years has already been born. I believe I am that human being.
Then we have Jessica Walter as Mallory Archer in the show Archer. This is a very good example of a loose guideline. It's not exactly distinct rhythmic chunks, it's just a loose idea of how to perform it. It's very musical, yet somewhat unpredictable and difficult to define. Now, in general, she trails off at the end and lengthens certain words at the end of a thought, just trailing off a little bit, making the flow a little bit more sporadic. This gives her a very condescending tone, paired with other things in her personality and her voice, of course, but this really helps bring it home.
Go get my gray fox out of cold storage. Burt Reynolds is taking me to a movie premiere tonight, so help me God, if you throw that computer on the floor again, you'll wake up in a mental ward with total amnesia under someone else's name.
And finally, we have John Malkovich playing Dr. Mallory in Space Force. This is one of my favorites. I really, really enjoyed because it's so incredibly unique. It's something, John Malkovich does incredibly well. It's very slow speed and very rhythmic in flow. It's almost like a waltz, like dun 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 dun. Now, his trailing is very rarely clear cut. It's usually very glued, and there's a bridge between each of those rhythmic chunks. There's almost always an elongated sound between them.
Dr. Mallory will now explain how man and his barbaric nature will destroy space as he has the Earth. I would like to know why my science budget pales in comparison to the riches devoted to turning space into an orgy of death.
Okay, so that was the entire momentum category, covering speed and flow. So if you feel like you're in a rut, just thinking about the sound of a character and you just can't come up with it, try momentum. Thinking about it this way, without necessarily all the other elements, can really perhaps expand your mind and give you other avenues of how you could perform that character. Who knows, you might find something very unexpected but very fun. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope this helps you develop your character voices further. Please like and subscribe and check out What the World Podcast. It is an improvised comedy show done completely in character, and it's mainly there just as my personal practice, but anybody can listen to it. Perhaps they'll help in understanding how to apply these concepts to specific characters, and hopefully do them on your own. Thanks again, have a great time, be kind, and I'll see you soon.